Welcome to Agency Bytes, a podcast for agency owners, hosted by agency veteran and coach Steve Guberman. Agency Bytes is a podcast focused on delivering actionable agency information from agency experts in about 25 minutes. Why 25 minutes? Because who has the attention span for much more these days? And you can squeeze in a listen between meetings with time for a bathroom break or coffee refill before your next meeting.
This episode of Agency Bytes is brought to you by Ignition, the platform agencies use to stop chasing invoices, kill scope creep, and get paid on time every time. With branded proposals and automated billing and payments all in one place, Ignition helps you boost cash flow and scale without the admin chaos. Start getting paid on time at ignitionapp.com. Use code OUTSIGHT25 to save 50% off on monthly Pro or Pro Plus plans.
Welcome back to Agency Bytes. I'm your host, Steve Guberman from Agency Outsight, where I coach agency owners to build the business of their dreams. My guest this week is Leah Leaves. She is the founder of Alderaan Operations Solutions, where she helps remote digital agencies grow without the grind. She's known for her no-fluff, systems-first approach. She and her team embed expert operations managers directly into agencies to break up bottlenecks, reduce burnout, and build businesses that can scale without the founder in every decision, which, man, we need that more and more. It is so good to see you. I'm so grateful you're here with me. And how are you today?
I'm doing great. I get to spend the next few minutes with you. So this is a good day already.
Upside for me. Yay. All right. So Alderaan, I know it's a Star Wars reference. I'm probably butchering the name a little bit because I'm not a huge Star Wars nerd. I know you're super into it. Give the backstory on the business, your background that led to the business, and the origin of the name.
Yeah, well, and thank you for having me on here because I always love talking about Alderaan. And you're right. Yeah, Alderaan, it is a Star Wars reference. It is Princess Leia's home planet in Star Wars. Yeah,
Perfect.
for the ones that got blown up.
Perfect sense.
But yeah, it's really funny to see, especially online, who gets the reference immediately because they'll come into like a Zoom room with me. They'll be like, "Hey, Leia," and wink at me. So that is a little bit about where that reference came from. And I was very lucky that when I started my business, back in the day, I actually started as an independent contractor, and I was working more on the marketing side myself. I was doing content marketing. My background had been in journalism, so I started to transition that to SEO and content marketing very early. And when I had sat down and was trying to think of this, really creative name, I was just banging my head against a wall, and my husband walked by, and he's like, "Oh, it's Alderaan." It's so simple. It's so straightforward. And so that's where, it came from. And I have to give, credit where credit is due to him because he is definitely the creative one, and I'm the systems one. And I found that out because I kept working, in agencies where I was surrounded by other incredibly creative individuals. And my natural type A personality started coming out where I just started organizing them and the things that they were doing, and the customers and the communications, and it felt so organic and natural. And that was how I started shifting from the marketing side, from more of that externally facing, client facing side, more internally to internal operations, administration, business management. And it really flourished from there because once I was able to be a part of a little bit of everything, things started to click even more into place. And it kept growing to the point where I was able to be a full-time COO with an agency for several years, had such an amazing time, but did what a lot of agency folks do and burned out because I tried to do everything myself. And I had to learn that lesson the hard way. Again, many people do. And once I shifted my perspective on the who, the what, the where, the when, the why, the how, and really started to look at the bigger picture rather than all of the details, particularly when I was then a fractional COO for multiple agencies. And I was seeing the greater picture across not just one agency, but multiple agencies and then the industry. That's when it really started gaining traction. And then luckily for me, I and the reason I say luckily is because it was such a shift. But luckily for me, I had an opportunity to have that pivotal moment that I think a lot of agency owners do when they're the bottleneck.
Yeah.
And I was able to acutely, like from a third party perspective, view that and go, oh my gosh, I'm starting to do it again. I'm starting to burn out because I'm the bottleneck and I need to shift gears. And what does that look like? And so for me, it was getting out of the seat of fractional COO and actually shifting into the CEO mindset and being the business owner. So now we have other fractional operations professionals that get to do what I did and love to do it for one or two, agencies at a time instead of 3, 4, 5, at a time. So that's how it's evolved, over time and to where I'm at now, which is actually in the owner seat, in the CEO seat, and being much more of the true visionary, that I think, bottled up for a long time. So it's been quite an organic evolution in the business.
And how many years in are you?
So technically, I started the business back in 2013, but that was, as that marketing contractor. In its current iteration, it's been just about 5 years.
Awesome. Okay. So it's interesting just kind of thinking back to that kind of storyline, how you break out and separate like the creative from the analytical, operational, et cetera, kind of person. And I get so many people in my life who are like, I'm not a creative person. I can't design anything or paint anything or whatever. And I argue that I think everybody is creative. Everybody has potential for creativity. And I especially look at really good ops people, really good account people, really good PMs. That's a lot of creativity to juggle what they do, to manage what they do, to look at the bigger picture of the vision of the CEO and say, all right, as the ops person, how do I help execute? Like it takes creativity to make that happen. It's not just spreadsheets and Venn diagrams and all that. You know what I mean? So I always think it's interesting how we put those in separate boxes as opposed to like fluidly kind of connect them in some ways. That's just
I would
an
agree.
observation.
Yeah, I would agree with you because I think one of the superpowers of most operators, is their problem-solving ability. They have very high functioning, quick start ability to take disparate information and distill it down into an action plan, next steps, takeaways, and that you're right is a very creative function. I think where we've recognized, for most operators, is that creative function, just like any creative, needs to be nurtured, and needs to be supported. And we've just found that it's in a slightly more structured way than, what we would deem more traditional creatives. So actually having a group of operators together, it's amazing how they are, I think, just as fluid, with their ideas, as let's say like a more traditional creative, as we would term it, like a graphic designer, and a design group. So you're right. I think there are a lot of similarities, and for the sake of, most conversations, I know that, most operations folks also, it's natural when you're problem solving to start categorizing, synthesizing the information. So we immediately start bucketing things. Yeah. And it, again, goes to exercising that creative muscle of being organically operationally minded.
Yeah. So I think at any size agency, solopreneur running a team of contractors, 10 people, 50 people in-house, whatever, that idea of bottleneck and burnout is a reality for probably all leadership roles, maybe even down into like the junior people that are, doing all the grunt work. And from your perspective, like what are those key identifiers where it's like, hey, I need to put an operator in-house as this person that's going to help build systems, put things in place, alleviate some of the pressure on these key bottlenecks? Like what are those identifiers that you look for?
Yeah, so this goes back to how I think of all systems and how I think of all problems is we first need to identify the goals. We need to identify, what we're going toward, and why, and then the systems, that we can build to achieve those goals, and then the team, to use the systems to achieve those goals. And the issues more often than not can come back to all three of those steps. One, that you have unclear goals or you have no goals at all. That is a primer, unfortunately, for bottlenecks and for burnout syndrome. Is because when you are just reacting all day long, you're going to cement yourself, as that bottleneck where everybody's going to keep coming to you for absolutely everything, and there because there's no bigger picture why. What are we aiming for? Why are we here? What are we going towards? So having clarity and goals can help prevent that. I think then next in the systems, very similarly, for bottlenecking, that if you don't have systems, and when I talk about systems, I'm talking about some of the basics of, let's say, your client journey of your customer onboarding, your customer management and retention system, and your customer offboarding.
You're talking process or procedures, not necessary, or SOPs or whatever, not like a platform like ClickUp. When you say systems, that's what you're referring to.
Correct. Yes. Yeah, exactly. The concept of systems rather than the literal platforms or tools. Exactly. Yeah. And so when you don't have those things identified or clarified or documented, and it doesn't need to be at a procedural level. It doesn't need to be literally the how-to of every step along the way. I think a lot of agency owners think that they have to have that in order to be successful. And more often than not, your team is much more capable than you think they are with just a little bit of context. And so if they have the background context of why are we doing this, then they have the background context of why we do it the way we do it and how, we want success to look like, then that's a system right there and then, and
So
that
more
could,
guardrails with like a start and an end, as opposed to step one, do this, step two, like not the
oh,
minutia. Don't micromanage the system for the talented people that you've put in place, because you put them in place to trust them. More of, this is where we're starting, this is the goal of the end, these are the guide rails along the way. Go execute, right?
yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, it can be the 80%, that needs to get you most of the way there, rather than 100% with every little detail along the way. Yeah, and so honestly, I'd say for most agency owners to help prevent, more of the bottlenecking, of themselves, and then also the long-term, burnout, is to get some of those documented, just the basics, the framework, of some of these systems. Again, it doesn't have to be to the detail level of every step along the way, because then when you get to the team, you know, this is the most nuanced, because you are dealing with people, right? You're dealing with different personalities. But honestly, they can be incredibly successful with, again, just a little bit of that context from the goals, from the systems. And then once you empower them to use those systems and to aim for those goals, more often than not, again, they're more capable, than you think they are. And so where I see a lot of agency owners really leaning in, unfortunately, to that burnout cycle is they're starting in the reverse, right? So they're micromanaging the team. They're in every single conversation. They're in every single email. They're jumping in and doing it themselves, right? Because they haven't set any frameworks. They haven't explicitly communicated any of their goals, or where they want to go with the agency. And so that's where they get stuck. Now they're micromanaging. Now they're losing their joy for what they started the business in the first place. And so if we just flipped it back, and said, okay, why are we here again? What are we doing? And then how can we achieve that? And with simple systems and frameworks and just like a little bit of scaffolding. And then now let's nurture the team with it, and let's communicate it with them. Let's be transparent with them because they're here for a reason. It's very, very clear in my mind, with most agency owners, when you have clear goals and then you have some scaffolding of systems, it's very clear then who wants to be there and who's going to stick with you versus who's just punching the clock and you can get rid of, or they're going to self-select out. So it kind of takes care of itself at that point if you follow, that in order.
Yeah.
Manual billing, late payments, scope creep. If your agency's revenue is leaking, Ignition can help. It automates proposals, billing, and payments in one platform, so you close deals faster and spend less time chasing money. Simplify billing and get paid faster at ignitionapp.com. Use code OUTSIGHT25 to save 50% off on monthly Pro or Pro Plus plans.
The big picture that screams to me from that whole scenario is we need to teach more people how to delegate and what to delegate and why to delegate. And like, there's a whole workshop there. I'm going to write that down, put that on the vision board for later in the year. But is there a size that this is like more prominent in your experience, agency? Like, is it the sub 5 people, 25 person? Like, where is the owner the biggest culprit of this?
Ooh, that's a great question, because I would argue that I see this at every size of
Okay.
agency.
That's
So
fair.
whether they're 50 million, or they have 100 people, or they have 5 people, we still see it. We still see, that agency owners can be in this cycle of being the bottleneck and then ultimately leading to burnout. And burnout is really insidious, in our industry. It's such a terrible issue that we're dealing with that I don't think, people really talk about in depth. There's a lot of reference to it, but not necessarily a lot of conversation on how best to prevent it, which I agree, a big part of that is delegation, right? And learning how to, in EOS terms or entrepreneurial operating system terms, it's called delegate and elevate, right? And so I do think that it can happen within any size, of company, of any size agency. And that being said, there are some trends that we'll see. So, for example, we see typically agencies that are under 1 million that have maybe just a handful of team members. And when I say team members, I mean it could be contractors, it could be employees, it could be full-time, part-time, doesn't matter, just number of team members that they have that they're working with. So typically on the smaller side, maybe like 5, like a handful of them. We'll see typically that small, where they are what we call the trusting optimist, where they might have hired some of their friends or people that they really liked, but that aren't actually the best fits. So they trust, that, oh, everybody just is here for the right reasons, and everybody just knows what they're doing. And so they're not leaning into systems because they feel like that is going to actually be too much like corporate and red tape. So they're flying a bit too much by the seat of their pants for it. And again,
Also, if I could jump in, if they're hiring friends and people they trust, they probably are not really good at extending authority over these people or be acting like the boss person to say this is how we should do things. They're just trusting that so-and-so is going to get it done because I've known them and they've done it. So, you know what I mean? Like, there's more of a friendship than a boss-employee, boss-contractor kind of relationship. And I think that's a detriment.
Yeah, there's a huge lack of accountability, a huge lack. And it's solvable, with, again, a few spices, that we add in of systems, for example, like an accountability chart. Literally just putting pen to paper, and saying who's responsible for what can help actually increase true trust or real trust in that situation. So that's typically what we see, in really, really small. And once they start building into the accountability, they start leaning into some of those systems. And they're like, oh my gosh, I really see some of our gaps, but then some of our opportunities. And I want to grow and I want to hit that $1 million mark and I want to go above. And then we start seeing them as we see, falling into the firefighting founder trap. Because typically 1 to 2 million, 1 to 3 million, it's still actually all on their shoulders because they haven't really documented those systems clearly. So they may have spit out a quick SOP. They may have hired a VA to help with one task, but they're not thinking from the top down. They're not thinking big picture. They're often thinking just in task mode. And so they're very reactive. And honestly, they are just, oh my gosh, they are in firefighting mode to the nth degree, where it's every single part of the business that they're in. And that's when they're feeling most of the bottleneck feeling, because they just don't understand why nobody else can do things and they have to keep jumping in.
Or it's just quicker to do it myself than explain it to so-and-so. Or, I'd hate to ask so-and-so to stop what they're doing to do this when I can just do it myself. It's the worst mindset to have. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, and it goes back to your point about doing a delegation conversation, and like what does that really look like? Because it's not just shoving shit off of your plate onto someone else's. Excuse my language, but it's true. It's like it's not just taking all of this stuff that you really hate and just throwing it onto someone else. It's got to be strategic. It's got to be thought through. So we see a lot of people getting stuck in that particular bottleneck phase, which then burns them out hardcore because they're working 8 hours a week. They're not seeing their family, and they're starting to resent their business. Right. And it's again really insidious, of how through line this burnout, culture can become very quickly.
Yep.
And so if we can kind of right the ship and get them back, on track with, having clear goals, building the system, starting to trust their team, really let them do what they should be doing, then once they're into like, we see typically like 3 to 6 million, is more so where it's kind of funny because they become a different kind of bottleneck. It's not the every day for everything. This is where they start to become a little bit more of the, oh, well, wait a second, I'm actually out of that system now. I'm not in every email, but I've got too much time on my hands because they haven't planned for what they're going to do as a business owner when they're not in client service, when they're not like in the operations of every little piece of the business. So these are what we call the reluctant gatekeepers, because they don't actually want to be back in there, but it's kind of like when people haven't planned for retirement, and all of a sudden that retirement comes of age for them. And then you hear the story of, they sit on the beach reading it for 2 weeks, and then they get absolutely bored out of their skull.
Yep.
Right? It's very similar in these smaller agencies, like the 3 to 6 million, where they just didn't plan ahead, and think of the goals, of what do they want to do once they're out of being the bottleneck of delivery, the bottleneck of recruiting and HR, and so they start to poke holes, in other people's work, not because they're trying to micromanage, not because they don't trust, their team, but because honestly, they have a little bit too much time on their hands and their mindset hasn't shifted.
Right.
Once the mindset shifts into being more of that CEO, more of that business owner, that's when we start seeing them as, again, what we call them, the visionary leaders. So we have 4 agency owner types that I've just kind of walked through.
Yeah.
And that 4th one is the visionary leader, where they are confident in their team. They know where they're going. They've got the right systems, and they have others to handle it for them. And I'll be honest that an operator is needed at every single one of those stages, because otherwise they'll get stuck on their own. So equally as important, they'll need, some level of support, structure. So whether that's like a mastermind group, or an executive coach, we do highly recommend that they literally have someone else, third party, to talk to as well, because they'll be doing a lot internally with an operator, but they still need, kind of a gut check, with someone else.
I know.
But that's kind of how we see. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I see so many agency owners coming to me screaming about working too many hours, not being able to do the work that they love doing, whether it's brand strategy or design or whatever they want to be doing, because they're doing all these other things. And once we like really dig into it, it's, you need a second in command. You need somebody that can come in and run this thing for you, because you don't want to run it. You launched a business because you didn't like the way the other person was doing it, and now you're stuck running a business, and you really would rather be doing UX or whatever it is that you love doing. So that second in command, to your point, at all these different levels, needs to do that much more. That role needs to scale with the business as it scales, as the systems scale, as the CEO steps away from the day-to-day. There's more things that need to happen. So you talk a lot also, I think, about like, how do you transform this even as a non-billable role, like embedding one of these operators and having them kind of put playbooks in place and accelerate the agency's growth. It's a force multiplier. And so it's got to be at a certain size agency where they can do it in a non-billable role, because small shops just can't afford it. So, it's a highly strategic role. It's not a cheap role. It's not a inexpensive service that you guys provide, or, that they need to put in place. So I want to talk real quick about AI and what you're seeing in the operations space for automations, and how agencies are, or maybe they're not, in implementing AI into their internal operations? What are you seeing the miss? What are you seeing the cliff coming at them with this as a missed opportunity?
Yeah, I would say that everyone should have an AI ops strategy at this point, and an internal roadmap of what they're doing with AI, what they're doing next. Even if it's basic stuff. And what I say, or what I mean by basic, for example, is manually taking a meeting notes recording, because the AI note takers have been around for a long time now, right? And we've been using them for a long time, but not a lot of people have been leveraging them. So taking the meeting notes, and running it through maybe like a custom, GPT that has been written specifically to listen for red flags in like client communication. So you can have your account managers take their meeting notes, run it through this custom GPT that you've written for them, or that they've written for themselves, that specifically is listening for, any of those, like those language cues, that those verbal cues, that we may not have picked up in the client meeting, but afterward we can analyze for. Like that's a very manual process, but that's an example of utilizing kind of a basic, straightforward, AI process, right now that could help anyone learn to better support their clients and increase their client retention.
Yeah.
Right? So
That's a low hanging fruit, easy to do, easy to implement. The roadmap that you talk about, are you seeing that they're assigning a key role in, all right, you're in charge of how we figure out AI as an agency, whether it's internal or selling to clients? Or is it like, hey, anybody who can figure it out and bring an idea to the team, Wild West, let's all just go gung-ho onto it? Are you seeing one or the both?
I would say we're seeing more of the latter, the Wild West, and we're heavily, heavily suggesting that everybody goes to the former, that
Yeah.
they have somebody that owns it. And that more often than not, is the operator, right? That they need to be maybe not the AI visionary. They don't need to be the one that brings all of the different ideas to the table, but you do still need to have somebody that manages it and that prioritizes it. Because it's just another layer, of the goals. It's just another layer in systems, and it's just another layer in your team, right? If you're thinking of your accountability chart, and you're looking at some of those like AI assistant roles, that needs to be on the accountability chart. Again, that goes back to then HR and operations.
We're putting robots into the org chart now?
Yes, we have been, and I would highly encourage, that it is identified, because that is a task that somebody is responsible for. And if somebody needs to be articulated in the accountability chart with like a different color so that people feel, more comfortable, that like, okay, here are the human roles and here, the AI roles, like whatever works for you, as long as you're starting to use it, as long as you're starting to plan for it, as long as you're starting to be strategic for it. Because we see the most successful agencies right now actually have a plan. It's not that they've AIified everything. It's not that they're ahead of the curve and they've figured it all out. It's just that they have a plan. They know what they're doing today. They know what projects are being worked on that have AI in them. They know what's coming next, and they don't know exactly where it's all going to go. We're not talking about like a 3 to 5 to 10-year plan for your AI roadmap. We are saying at minimum, you should have the next probably 6 to 12 months at least identified of like, what are those pieces of your business that need to have an AI angle. So client service is a great example. There's so many opportunities there. But then just as equally, if you can look internally, and look at your recruiting systems, there are a ton of playbooks that could support your recruiting playbooks, your recruiting processes, your workflows there. Even in HR, I'd say finance, at least from my perspective, is lagged a little bit. And that's just because of more security concerns and like HR sometimes as well. But there's strides being made, every single hour, let alone every single day in this. So at the end of the day, as long as you can have a plan, you can have some simple projects that that everybody is working toward, or where you want to go. Again, this goes back to the goals. Like have your goals, identified, because then you can start building out the systems, and then you can really empower your team to be leveraging them on a more regular basis.
Yeah, I love that. And I don't think it can be beyond 6 to 12 months, because who the heck knows what we're looking at beyond a year. It's impossible to predict that. It's transforming so darn quickly. Maybe an unpopular opinion, but I love this more for the ops side in automating processes and reducing hands-on work versus like doing the actual creative or dev stuff. I don't know that that's prime time ready yet, but you can automate internal processes and client onboardings and things like that. And it's just a time saver. And I'm a big fan of that. I'm blown away by what people are doing with AI operators now and tools and automations. And, I try and do simple stuff, and I get error messages from it all day long. So I'm still figuring it out myself. So,
Well, and to that degree as well, like something that you mentioned, about like client onboarding, like automating client onboarding and using AI in it, like that has not changed actually for years. Like think of like the automations boom, several years ago, where like all of a sudden you could automate everything and like everyone was doing things in Zapier and it was so exciting, and it still is. Don't get me wrong, you still should be, leaning into that. But it's a showcase, of it doesn't have to be honestly that new or innovative, in your AI roadmap. Like, look at what you already have, that people have been telling you to make processes and systems out of since day one when you started your business, or day now. So it doesn't have to be like this really big new thing that I think a lot of people get really overwhelmed with. You've got a lot of low hanging fruit in your business that you could leverage. And there you go. Like there's a 6 to 12 month roadmap right away. Just what you have internally and what you have right now that you haven't systematized or you haven't automated yet. So this is a great opportunity to weave in AI into that roadmap.
yeah, well said. I love that. Thanks for pointing that out. All right, I want to wrap up with a couple of real quick rapid fire questions. Probably nothing to do with Star Wars, but maybe we'll see your spin on it. So the first is, what's a skill that you've mastered that most people would not guess about you?
Ooh, that people wouldn't guess about me. That's a hard one because I'd say my biggest skill, is being able to rapid fire distill a lot of complex information into a very short 3-step system. I put everything into the rule of threes. I think everybody can remember it, beginning, middle, and end. And so
Mm-hmm.
if I can take this big concept and big idea and boil it down for you into 3 steps, absolutely love doing that. So that may be something that some people know about me, though. But
Yeah.
that's that comes to mind. Mhm.
Yeah, I do love that. I think it's always important to just keep distilling things down. If you can get a system to 10, can you get it to 5? Can you get it to, so I love that. And I think, yeah, I kind of nailed that about you the first time I met you. It's like, you are that keen on systems. If your life had a theme song, what would it be?
Should have thought about this beforehand. If I had a theme song, um, it's going to sound a little cliche, but I'm going to still say it, is Order Out of Chaos. I think there's still a lot of there's still a lot of like disorganized, like all this kind of mashigana kind of energy, like crazy kind of energy that I'm
Mm-hmm.
always putting into order.
Is that actually a song, though?
No, I don't know enough song that to thinking of like what would the name of the song be? Because yeah, I'm not enough of a music nerd, to have like a song, that I could pull out.
Fair enough. I would also say maybe something directed by John Williams. Didn't he write the Star Trek music?
Oh yeah, mm-hmm.
I'll throw that out. So he can write the music for "Come Out of Chaos" for you. So there you
Thank
go.
you.
What's
Mm-hmm.
the weirdest or most unexpected way that you've landed a client?
Oh, this is one from many years ago. There was, and I'm completely forgetting the app's name, but there was this app, a social media app that had come out where it was audio based and you could pop into different rooms, and just it was like all these different thematic rooms, and I cannot remember the name of it off the top of my head. Um,
Oh, was it
It'll come to
Clubhouse?
me. Clubhouse, yes,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, so I was on Clubhouse and I was going around to different rooms and I jumped into a room that specifically was on uh it was on recruiting, but from the angle of specifically for marketing, jobs. And there were a lot of people that were in the room that were looking for jobs. And I was not looking to hire necessarily immediately, but I'm always looking for the right connections, the right, networking areas to be in. And one of the speakers in that room was an agency owner who we instantly connected, like in the room, and we just started riffing and chatting with each other about like all these different recruiting systems and agency this and agency that and marketing this and marketing that, and kind of forgot that there were other speakers and like other people in the room, but just like had such a great time. And so we followed up later, and he became a client a few months after that.
Very cool. Yeah, I don't think I ever engaged in Clubhouse more than like one call. I was just, it wasn't my bag, but that's very cool that you were like honed in on this person, and it was a good match. Leah, thank you so much for joining me. I'm super grateful for your experience, what you bring to the agency space. Folks, check out Alderaan Operations Solutions. Leah Leaves is a gem and somebody that you should definitely connect with. So thank you, Leah.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure being on here, and I'm really excited for continuing the conversations.
Always. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks again for tuning in to Agency Bytes. If you know someone with expert knowledge on a topic that agency owners would love to hear about, go to agencyoutsight.com/podcast-guest and nominate them.